Hello, it's Parm King, the Dungeon Master for Legends of Barovia Curse of Strahd campaign, and today we are going to talk about token vision and the different effects it also has on lighting, on creatures, and some tips and tricks that I use setting up my token vision. Now, there's two vision settings in Foundry, and let's go over those really quickly and talk about a couple other definitions that I want to use to help give you a better understanding about how vision works and some tips that I use in my game. The first thing here is I've created two characters here, a human with a vision, and for purpose of demonstrations only is bright vision is going to be set at 40 and the dark vision is going to be set at 80. And we do that by when we click on our token here, we open up the vision section and we have dim vision and bright vision. And dim vision for D&D as well as some other role-playing games represents dark vision radius, and the bright vision represents obviously the bright vision radius. In my example, the human here only has 40 feet of bright vision. He has no vision abilities, dark vision or dim vision abilities, and so I've set them to be the same. My elf over here has dark vision, and so I've extended the vision range that she has, her dark vision or dim vision, to 80 feet and her bright vision the same as the human as 40. And I'm going to demonstrate two important factors that we need to understand about this and some of the things that result. So let me reset the fog of war really quickly here. Alrighty, and I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to click on our human. Now, we set it to 40 feet, and I've put a little label underneath the character so we know his vision range. Is 40 feet, each square represents 5 feet, so the bright vision is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So this bright angle of vision represents his field of view. Everything's black. Behind that is known as the fog of war. He has no idea what the terrain features are, the geographical features, or if there's any creatures beyond his vision range. And this is one of the really cool things that Foundry introduces, is this fog of war that allows us as dungeon masters to put different objects and creatures and monsters out in this area. Now, when we talk about dim vision or dark vision, what we're talking about is extending the field of view. And if we click on our dark elf here, you can see that she has a secondary radius circle of an additional 40 feet. So she has the first 40 feet of bright vision, and then there's an additional dim vision radius, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, another 40 feet of dim vision, and she can see further than our human being because she has that dim vision or dark vision ability. Now, how does this impact seeing creatures, for instance? Well, I'm going to move this elf, and she's moving, and she all of a sudden exposes over here in her dim radius this skeleton up here, and this is in her dim radius arc, as you can see. This here is the fog of war. Now, if my elf down here moves out of range, again, let's just move her so she's not on top of the human, you can see that there's this layer here that is even another shade. So you have your bright vision, you have your dim vision, and now you have this new area here. It's kind of a shadow. We can call this either known vision or shadow vision. And what this known or shadow vision area is the area in which your player knows the geographical or terrain features, but is unable to see that if there's any creatures there. Think about it this way. The player's been in this area before and kind of knows, well, there's some trees and there's a building there, et cetera, but at any single instance, it doesn't know if there's a human, a creature, an NPC, a box, a coffin, a gold necklace, who knows? They just know the geographical features. And that's demonstrated as our character moves in and out of the dim vision range. As I move her up and expose more of her dim vision, she can see that there's tombstones, there's a graveyard, there's a fence here, and there's a creature here. Now, when she moves out of range again, this area, she can no longer see this shadow vision area or known vision area is she just knows geographical features there. When she starts moving out of the range of the skeleton, as soon as she steps out of the dim vision range, the skeleton as well disappears. Okay, so this shadow vision or known vision area is important for us to understand as dungeon masters, because while it may be visible on the map to the player who's playing, they're not going to be able to see any creatures in that area until the character steps in forward, in which the dim vision or bright vision exposes that. Let's take a look at it from the human perspective that doesn't have any dark vision. I'll go ahead and just reset the fog of war again, because it's the same factors apply, except for in this case he has no dim vision. He's exposing the skeleton up here. Through his bright vision, he goes up even further and exposes the graveyard a little bit and does a little exploring around, and then he retreats. And in this case, since he has no vision, as soon as he steps out of the bright vision range of the skeleton disappears. Yet he has this kind of shadow or no vision. He still knows in his mind the terrain and geographical features. He just doesn't know if there's any creature there. Let's talk a little bit about the dynamic lighting and the walls. For instance, we have our elf here, and she hasn't seen behind the rock. And even though the rock is within her bright vision and her dim vision, we're using a particular wall here, this terrain wall feature here, over these rocks. And what that's done is block the vision. She can see the rocks. She can't see on the other side of the rocks, even though that it's within her vision, both her bright and dim vision. Now, when she goes up and she exposes the skeleton there and she steps down behind the rocks, she can no longer see the skeleton. Now, you can see something we've done here is behind the rocks is now becomes, we see this interesting pie shape here. This entire pie shape here is shadow vision or known vision. She knows the terrain on the other side of the rock. She just doesn't know if there's a creature or not, or some other object that'd be a movable object. Mostly it's going to be creatures or NPCs until she's able to see it with her dim and bright vision. Now, this is all pretty simple and elementary, but we're going to get into some things that are important to also understand when it comes to lighting, because there's some dynamic things that happen that can create some leakage. So light leakage and vision leakage is something that we as dungeon masters need to think about with these NPCs and our characters. So I'm going to move the characters into the church and put her right in there. And I'm going to grab the other human and put him right inside as well. And they just entered into the church. And I'm just going to reset the fog of war again. And we're going to talk about our human first. We're going to take a look at what our human sees. Now, the human again has a bright radius arc of 40 feet. But as we open up, we see that there's lighting in the church. And there's a skeleton underneath the light. Now, this is beyond his normal bright vision radius. So why is he able to see the skeleton in the church? We're set to daylight in this example. This is absolute daylight. We can just double check by clicking on the configurations, looking down here. The darkness level is at 0. I've clicked on daylight, but yet he's able to see inside the church this skeleton that's far away. That's because the skeleton is within the light radius up here. And let's just click on the light. You can see here in the light, we have a bright radius of 20 and a dim radius of 40. So if any creatures within this light radius, dim or bright, our player will see this. Let's go back to the player's vision point of view, and we'll see that he can see the skeleton both in the bright radius, and if I move the skeleton out to the dim radius, which is right here, he'll be able to see the skeleton still in the dim radius. Now, as I've been clicking back and forth, you've probably noticed that there's a skeleton here in the fog of war, in the shadows. Now, normally this wouldn't make any sense. I mean, it seems that lighting dynamic logic has broken down, but it really hasn't. In this particular case, what you're explaining to your players is, well, this area is in the shadows. That you have a small chandelier over the altar that's lighting up part of the church. but the rest of the church is in the dark and in the shadows, and you're not able to see. So, a creature is lurking in the shadows. You're not able to see it, but you're able to see the skeleton that's underneath the light. Now, if we look at this, what happens again here is as we move our player forward and his bright radius gets in line with the light radius, you can see this skeleton now that's in his field of view, in his bright radius, and you also see the skeleton behind it. Now, if he moves out of back to where he was, we now created a new vision area. This is that shadow or known vision area. It's not necessarily fog of war, because he knows what the terrain features like. He just doesn't know if there's a creature there. This is just an area that he has remembered that, oh, this is an area with a bunch of pews and there's shadows there. And this is an area representing he knows the terrain, he just can't see in that terrain currently. If we switch this to our elven character, you can see that her dim radius arc also allows her to see into the darkness area that the other player can't. And so she's able to see both skeletons, the one that's in light far away and the skeleton that's in the shadow. Now, this is important to remember, especially when you're playing, placing creatures, that if they're going to be in a light element, they're going to be exposed. And if you want him hidden in the light element, you're definitely going to want to click on the shadow icon. So you go and click on your character and you put him in the shadows, toggle visibility, and technically, even though we can see it, he's grayed out, the players will not be able to see this creature. I like to, when I place all my characters, my creatures on the map, I always like to place them in shadow just in case, and then reveal them once they're in the token vision area. Now, let's talk about a couple of things that I do, my first tip. Now, what I really don't like, and when we take our characters back outside, and I'll just bring them both out here, is I really hate, this is just me personally, it looks like there's a spotlight, right, on my dark elf, and then she has a separate radius. And the spotlight, the bright radius, what it does is it just intensifies the brightness to the actual background lit area at the time. That's what the bright radius does. In the dim radius, just puts some opacity over the dim area. Now, one of the reasons I don't like bright light, because I enjoy lighting elements. I enjoy creating atmosphere. And what the bright light does is it diminishes the lighting work that you've done in the game. And let me demonstrate that. I'm going to bring both characters into the church up by the light here. I'm going to have my one guy right here by the light where his bright radius is right underneath the chandelier. And I'm going to bring my other creature where her dim vision is outside the radius of the chandelier. Right? So she has her dim vision. I'll just bring her dim vision I'll bring it in the corner here. And let me reset the fog of war again. And I'll click on our elf here. So her bright vision ends here, and her dim vision includes the lighting area. And you notice that in the dim vision, the lighting dynamic continues to work properly. But if we're standing with the human in the bright vision, it's just like shining a spotlight, and your lighting is really just kind of changing the color background here. It doesn't look like it's lighting at all, actually. So I don't really like the bright and dim vision. So this is what I do. This is my first tip. And you don't have to do this. This is just what I like to do. Now, as we've demonstrated, there is really no difference between bright and dim vision as far as creating exposure to creatures, right? They both do the same thing from a perspective of exposing creatures and not exposing creatures. And really what the bright and dim light do is just one area is dimmer and the other one area is brighter. And it creates this kind of lighting effect that I think is kind of unrealistic. There's bright light and all of a sudden, one square away, everything gets darker. So this is my tip. Tip number one. What I do in my game, and you don't have to do this again, some people might think this is wacky, is I just get rid of bright vision altogether. There's no bright vision. And I do that for both the human and the elf. There's no bright vision. Now, all we've done here is we've kept the vision the same. The dim vision, the human can see 40 feet, and the elf can see 80 feet. The exposure of creatures and elements outside the radius capacity has not changed. We just have one one level of illumination. That was hard. Illuminati slipped out. Was that a Freudian slip there? I don't know. There's one level of illumination throughout the entire vision scope. So what we're seeing here is the human's vision is you can see the skeleton over here is just a 40-foot range, and the dark elf has a 80-foot range, which includes both her bright and dim vision. So I just set one vision level and just use dim vision. There's two reasons I do that. Number one is I want to have the vision be not bright versus dark, just the same amount of vision. I can see further than you can because I have dark vision, and you can only see 40 feet. So it doesn't change. And that doesn't also change whether you set nighttime or daytime. They still have the same vision radius. Now, what I do in the church, the other reason I do this is because when we get to lighting in the church, dynamic lighting in the church, right, he still can't see the creature here, and she can. But what we have not done is we have not, by using the dim vision, even if I bring my main character up underneath the church, he's still experiencing the same lighting that he saw when he was down here. Remember when he was down here, he saw this lighting up here. Why should it be when he gets on up here, because he has bright light, all of a sudden his own bright vision kind of dominates the candlelight, right? So I want my lighting to remain the same throughout the experiences that my players are having. But I don't want to handcuff my dark vision people, so I just make they make them all dim vision, and one can see 40 and the other can see 80. Now, here's my tip number 2. I don't like, when we're outdoors, the concept of that there's just darkness. So I'm going to reset my dynamic lighting, like my players can't see anything beyond their, all of a sudden it's just blackness beyond their vision. And so what I do in the outdoor area is I'll bring this character, whoop, that's light, I don't want to do that. Let me delete that. I'm going to grab my character, I reset Fog of War, and I'm going to grab my character and bring him outside here and place him right here. Now, this is what I really don't like about the outside, using just relying on vision, is all of a sudden there's a field here, and let's say it's nighttime. I'm going to switch this to the evening. Let's say it's nighttime, and that what nighttime doesn't change anything about your vision. It just darkens the scene a little bit. So we've darkened the scene to make it nighttime. All right, and that's all it's doing is putting a filter over it to make it dark. And I'm going to, just for this is I'm going to lower my darkness level a little bit, so while you're watching it on here, it's not so dark. Okay, so here's his darkness vision, and you have this Fog of War. Now, you're just looking up out across the grass, and all of a sudden everything's black out there. Well, when you're out at night, you actually can probably see a little bit further than that, right? I understand the vision for able to see creatures, but the vision of the landscape, I understand this is Fog of War is awesome like this for buildings, inside dungeons, but outside, I don't like it. So how do I solve this problem? Well, this is an interesting lighting concept. So I'm going to put a light right over here. I'm going to make it really big. In fact, I'll just click on the light, and I'm going to get rid of the bright radius, make it 0, and I'm going to make the dim radius, say 500. I'm going to change the light color to a blue, like a lightish blue, something like that, and hit update. Now what I've done here is you can see the whole side of the map has gone blue from this light element. And it's done a couple of interesting things. Number one, it allows my character to see further. This is like moonlight. Moonlight's shining over the grass. And because there's moonlight, my creature is going to be exposed, right? My character can see across it. Now he can't see into the church, but the moonlight is illuminating the ground. What's nice is when my character is inside the church, the moonlight streams through the church. You know, you're creating another interesting element with moonlight streaming through the church, which I think is kind of a neat effect. So I have light, you know, streaming through the church. When we bring this to daylight, the moonlight will still be there, but it won't be as harsh. And what you can do is, if you want it in the daytime to make it the sun, well, you can just double click on this and make this kind of like a light, you know, like maybe, you know, morning color, whatever color you think represents like the sunlight. And you can see the sunlight now streaming through the windows here. And the entire map is lit up. So I like to use this lighting outside and outside elements. And it adds another unique feeling for my players who experience this. So think about this same thing, the lighting element. I'll make a copy of this. Copy, and I'll just put it over on this side, for instance. And you're in maybe the graveyard, right? And you want the graveyard to kind of be spooky. And so we grab our character and we move them into the graveyard. And the graveyard's got this kind of spooky element. We can make it nighttime as well here and make it kind of dark. And so now my character is in the graveyard. There's moonlight being cast out in the graveyard. And he's got this kind of spooky light that is creating some shadows from the gravestones, and his fog of war is still there. And then as he moves through the graveyard, behind one of the gravestones is there you go. There is a skeleton hiding behind the gravestone. So the lighting element does two things. The first is that it creates some interesting shadows. You've got a moonlight there that allows him to see further, which I think is probably an outside more representative of the character. The character should be able to see further beyond his visual distance because there's moonlight. But again, really close to him, there's a skeleton that's hiding behind one of the tombstones. So think about using lighting outside to create some moonlight or sunlight. It adds some it changes some visibility ranges for your players outside at night. You can still use these terrain walls, which I love using to hide certain elements. So I have terrain walls on, you can see on all the different gravestones here, that hides and creates shadows, allows my creatures to hide behind the gravestones. But the moonlight allows my player to see farther. Let me show you in one of the manners that I have. I've created, this one has both, I have it sunlight right now. So you can see the sunlight streaming through the windows. The fireplace is still going. Again, this character here, if we look at his token sheet, has no bright vision. He only has dim vision. And so he can see dim vision, and the sunlight's, you know, flowing through the windows, and you can still see that the fireplace is going and it's early morning. And if I want to change the lighting effect here, I can just change it to nighttime by clicking on, you know, making it like a bluish color here, like a light blue. And I update it, and all of a sudden my character is experiencing the moonlight shining through the windows. And it really, when he steps up to the window, he can see out throughout the garden or out through the property, you know, and the moonlight shining through the windows. And it just adds a really cool lighting element and gives your character a far larger field of range, adding moonlight or sunlight lighting up the area. What you don't necessarily want to do is do global illumination on that, because that'll light up areas even that are behind certain fog of wars that you don't want your players to see. So make sure it's still local. Set that light up in the corner and just give it a huge radius, and just use just the bright or just the dim, and set just the bright or the dim to the lighting that you want to cascade through there. Now, I will leave it with this request. So if anybody's watching this, one of the modules that I would love to have is to set moonlight or sunlight. And what you would do is you'd have your lighting element here, and you'd set it at the top of the page. and you'd have it slowly move across the top of the page. You could set it to sunlight or daylight. You could set it to a calendar or to a timer. And what that would do is it would show the light changing its angle through the windows, dynamically changing it. You could set it for full moon, half moon, new moon, morning, noon, and night. And so it gets brighter. And while your characters are playing, it's ticking off time. Technically, you can have it move 1 5-foot square every 5 minutes or 10 minutes or however you wish to do it, every hour, depending on how you're playing. And the lighting effect changes there. And that gives a feeling as the players are playing the game, especially in buildings or outside, is that time is changing, right? Time is moving forward. The lighting and the dynamic effects are going from night to daytime. So that would be a great module to have. I don't know if anybody knows how to do that. I'm not a module maker, but if you are, think about it. So 2 tips again, and before I go, number 1, this is my personal tip. You can decide to do it or not. Delete and don't use bright vision, just use dim vision. Set your dim vision to the maximum vision of your character. If it's dark vision and it's 160 feet or 120 or 180, just set that to 180. Make bright vision 0. Do the same for the characters that don't have bright vision. Just make the dim vision their maximum bright vision. That allows you to have one kind of lighting illumination throughout their vision range. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, think about placing lighting outside and illuminating outside locally and to cast shadows, like if it's the moon or the sun, that allows your players to see farther when they're outside. And as dungeon masters, always think about if your character, if your monster, your creature is in a lighted area, and also the range in which your characters are. Make sure to mark them invisible. If you want to put them out in the field but the characters can't see them, just mark them invisible. So those are my tips on token vision, how I set up token vision, some things to think about as a dungeon master and a player. I hope this was helpful. If it was, please like this video, please subscribe, and until next time, may all your rolls be critical 20s. And if they're critical ones, well, you know what I think. Thanks for watching.